Hi guys, welcome back. So there's been a little bit of chat lately in some of the comment sections to some of my videos just about some of the old Next Generation cast and where people are at the point of post Star Trek Nemesis and maybe around the time of Star Trek Picard. So today I thought I'd have a bit of a run through in terms of our classic characters from Next Generation and see if we can work out where all of them happen to be based on what's been said in movies, comics, all that sort of stuff. And then in chatting about our classic characters, postulate as to whether or not we may end up seeing any of them in the series. Is it viable?
We know that Riker and Troi and Data make an appearance in the series from what we've seen in the past trailers, but what about other characters? What are they up to?
Well, let's have a look at their past, and that might give us a bit of a hint as to their future. So sometime after Nemesis, Picard was promoted to the rank of Admiral, and he took command of the USS Verity, the Odyssey-class ship, with Raffi Musica as his first officer on that vessel to oversee and coordinate the evacuation of Romulus.
Something then happens in the course of the Romulan refugees being evacuated that causes Picard to lose his faith in Starfleet, and he then goes off to France to tend his vineyard for the next 12 years or so, it would seem.
So after Nemesis finished, we know that Riker and Troi left the Enterprise E, and Riker went off to command the USS Titan, with Troi as his counselor on board that ship. So it's probably a safe bet that in future issues of the Picard comic that are coming out in December and also in January leading up to the Picard series, that we might see an appearance in the comic of both Riker and Troi on board the USS Titan, involved somehow in the evacuation of Romulus. That would be my prediction, because they're obviously going to need a pretty large rescue fleet. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of ships that are being put together by Geordi. So I reckon there's a pretty safe bet that we might end up seeing Riker, Troi on the Titan involved in some way the relocation and evacuation of Romulus. We know from the 2009 Star Trek Countdown comic that when Picard left the Enterprise E, Data took command. So obviously Data's engrams or whatever that he implanted into B4 took hold, and it seems like Data has completely overtaken the B4 programming and has returned to his good self that we all know. So Data is in command of the Enterprise E now. There was a deleted scene in Star Trek Nemesis. I think it might have been in part of the conversations that occurred at Riker and Troi's wedding. They said that Beverly Crusher was leaving the Enterprise E and she was going off to head up Starfleet Medical. So if we're taking the deleted scenes from Nemesis as canon, which maybe we take that with a bit of a grain of salt, Crusher is head of Starfleet Medical on Earth at this particular point. One piece of information which seems to be consistent looking at both the 2009 Countdown comic and also the most recent Star Trek Picard comic is that Geordi, sometime shortly after Nemesis, has ceased being chief engineer on board the Enterprise E, and he has gone to the Utopia Planitia shipyards to be in command of the construction of new starships. We've seen that in the Picard comic, where it says that Geordi is basically overseeing the mass construction of a brand new fleet of evacuation ships for the Romulans. And also in the 2009 Star Trek Countdown comic, that information is consistent. So we've got Geordi heading up Utopia Planitia. He's constructing starships both to evacuate Romulus, and he also was the designer and creator of this jellyfish starship that Spock piloted to try to suck the Romulan star that was going supernova into a black hole. So that information is consistent. I think we can assume at this point that Geordi is the head of Utopia Planitia shipyards for Starfleet as the chief engineer and commanding officer of that facility, which only leaves Worf. And the only piece of information we have to go on in terms of what Worf's activities are post-Nemesis, pre-Picard, is the 2009 Star Trek Countdown comic, which has Worf as a general in the Klingon military. So he's commanding fleet of Klingon ships. He's wearing a Klingon uniform. So if we're taking that as gospel, which I think maybe take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, that Worf is now working on the Klingon homeworld. He's got a fleet of ships. He's a general. He's a pretty high up commander in the Klingon fleet. We're all talking about events that occurred around the year 2386, 2387. And Picard takes place in 2399. So in terms of our original character's involvement in the show, we know that Michael Dorn paid a visit to the set of Picard. We know he signed the slate or the clapperboard, but whether he was just there as a friend of Patrick Stewart and came along just to say hi and decided to sign at the same time, or whether he makes an appearance in some way. So obviously this is all speculation. I'm just going on comic book and lines of dialogue that have been spoken in previous films and so forth to get a bit of an idea as to where our classic characters might be at the time of Picard and whether we're likely to see them pop up or not. So as always, thanks for listening. Please subscribe, leave a comment, click like and the notification bell, and I'll see you next time.